me since the start of the tournament, and now you've seen me twice in one day, because it is Wimbledon finals weekend, ladies final down, Ashley Barty the champion, and one singles final still to go. It's the top seed, the world number one, Novak Djokovic, up against Matteo Berrettini in his maiden Grand Slam final. So, who's going to win? We're here to try and answer those questions. We're here to look at the paths of both players to date, to dissect what's gone on, to look at some key numbers, to think about what might go down in the final, and ultimately to make a call on who wins Wimbledon 2021, Djokovic or Berrettini. Now, if you were here earlier, you'll know that I had a bit of a mare. First of all, the Wi-Fi was dreadful, and secondly, I hit the wrong button when I was setting up the stream, and the live chat was disabled. Thankfully, I've sorted that out this time around, so if you do happen to be here live, and I know, unfortunately, that will be a minority of people, but if you're here live, feel free to discuss in the live chat, as I do the preview and prediction. I'm very curious to see who you're calling in this, because obviously one of these players is by far the more experienced and definitely the heavy favourite, so I'm just looking to see how many people might be giving Berrettini a real shot here. Djokovic versus Berrettini for the third time. We're going to have a look at both players' paths to date, and as usual, we're going to kick off with the lower ranked player, which on this occasion is the number 7 seed Berrettini. In my opinion, he was one of the most underrated players of the 2019 season. He really started to push through. Really impressive in all aspects of his game and the way he was stepping up, and he has, not in a flashy way, but very steadily developed and got going, and he's really asserted himself on the tour over the past few months, so full credit to him. Does still come into this as the underdog though. So Berrettini got started in round one with a 4-set win over Guido Pella. It was 6-4, 3-6, 6-4, 6-love. So just getting going nicely. Saved 9 break points, all 9 break points that he faced in his second round match against Botic van de Zandschulp. It's really interesting because Van de Zandschulp is pushing through now, but actually it was barely 2 years ago that I saw him at an ITF event, which he won actually. But just as a side note, Van de Zandschulp, talented player. He's very consistent on the Challenger Tour right now and worth keeping an eye on. But no match for Berrettini, who got that one done in straights, winning his first tiebreak of the tournament on the way to that victory. 6-3, 6-4, 7-6 the scoreline. And then Alias Bedene in the third round. Bedene is a tough player, really, across surfaces, but might not be so favoured on grass. 6-4, 6-4, 6-4 for Berrettini, rolling into the fourth round where he had little trouble against Ilya Ivashka, 6-4, 6-3, 6-1 in that fourth round match. The draw had opened up slightly, but you can only play what's in front of you. Berrettini took full advantage. Credit to him. Serving big, hitting big off the forehand, mixing it up off the ground. He's been great to watch here at Wimbledon, as he was at the French Open, where he reached the quarterfinals and went down to Novak Djokovic. So it's interesting to see how Berrettini is able to transfer his form across surfaces, and that shows you how he's got a well-rounded and well-developed game that can move across those different surfaces and those different conditions and still be effective, and it's making him very dangerous at the moment. So Berrettini coming through the fourth round in straight sets, but he was taken to 4 sets again in the quarterfinal by his very good friend Felix Auger-Aliassime. Auger-Aliassime, the number 16 seed. This was something of a breakthrough run for Felix, because as talented as he is and as young as he still is, he has struggled to really push through and get those big wins on the Grand Slam stage. So it was big for him to upset Alexander Zverev and make it to that quarterfinal stage. But you did feel that with Berrettini's composure and his big serving and the firepower that Auger-Aliassime struggled to match consistently, you did feel that Berrettini would probably have the upper hand there. He did let a set slip, the second set, and then it was a very tight third set that could have gone either way, but his focus saw him through. 6-3, 5-7, 7-5, 6-3. Berrettini finishing off pretty clinically at the end of that match, seeing himself through to a second Grand Slam semi-final, his first Grand Slam semi, since his maiden last four appearance at the 2019 US Open. So that was at the back end of the season where he was really coming through. 6-3, 6-love, 6-7, 6-4 for Berrettini. Now, since that's the semi-final, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper there and talk about the match in more detail. So Berrettini steamrolled through those opening two sets in deeply impressive fashion that really made me sit up and take notice. I know that Berrettini was high up on the list for a lot of people when it came to Wimbledon contenders coming into the fortnight. I certainly didn't write him off, but I had him a little further down my list than some other people just because of his lack of experience. We've seen at recent Grand Slams how much experience counts for in these best of 5 set matches at the back end of majors. And it's plain to see that Berrettini is pretty short on it when you look at his results on paper. It wasn't anything to do with his form or his game that had me kind of second guessing his chances, because obviously he won the Queen's Club Championships coming into this and was a standout contender for many going into that and was able to shoulder that expectation and perform, did really well. But yeah, that lack of experience was definitely something that had me not overly sure that he would go this deep, particularly when you looked at the likes of Roger Federer and Daniel Medvedev in his half of the draw. Didn't have to face any of them because Hubert Hurkacz got that brilliant 3-set win over Federer that ended with a 6-love set. Plain to say that Federer did not peak, did not hit his stride, and looked lost for options at the back end of that match. But you have to credit Hurkacz with his amazing versatility and the way he was able to keep himself so cool and so loose. That was not on display against Berrettini. He looked a little bit like a deer in the headlights, Hurkacz, for the opening 2 sets. You've got to give Berrettini some credit for that with his pace of play, the spring that was in his step relentlessly, such positive energy from Berrettini. And why shouldn't he be positive when he can pick up so many cheap points and give himself something of a safety net? The acceleration that he gets on that forehand and the whip that he gets on it is something special, particularly because the big serves he's sending down, he's often getting a slower, shorter response on the return. He can get around that ball and he can send it in any direction. And that makes the forehand really pretty devastating and pretty good on the backhand as well. Berrettini's movement throughout this tournament has been really impressive. He's able to adjust, he's able to read the game. And really, you couldn't say that there was much wrong with the 6-3 and 6-love set that he laid down. And Hurkacz looked ready for a quick exit. But Berrettini did leave the door open. Hurkacz used the crowd. The crowd at Wimbledon, they pull for the underdog unless there's a Brit playing. Although the Brits tend to be the underdogs, to be fair. But the crowd do get behind the underdog, and Hurkacz utilised their energy. As well as Berrettini was serving, he should still have won that 3rd set, in my opinion. He should still have come through that. But Hurkacz kept pegging him back. He kept staying in it. And then when it got to tiebreak time, Berrettini just poofed. It was not the same sustained level from him. There were chinks in the armour. Hurkacz was able to get himself into the forecourt more, and that was a big strategy from Hurkacz, the number 14 seed, just moving himself up the court more and stopping Berrettini from keeping him on a string at the back of the court. And credit to him for being able to make those moves, but Berrettini dropped off slightly. And credit to him, he regrouped quickly to break in the opening game of the 4th set, which was pretty key, and come through in 4 sets. But that rang alarm bells for me, the fact that he lost that 3rd set. And I'll tell why when I come to the part where we look ahead to how the final might play out. When he takes on Novak Djokovic, who's shocked that he's here? I mean, with the absence of Rafael, Nadal and Dominic Thiem anyway, and Djokovic's form, the fact that he's won the opening 2 slams of the year, it was very difficult when you looked at his half of the draw to say that he wouldn't make this stage. And he's Novak Djokovic. He doesn't have much trouble shouldering pressure, and he doesn't disappoint. He was a bit shaky, though, in his opening match. He didn't have the grass court preparation that he would have liked, because obviously the French Open was pushed back a week. So there was less time to get that warm-up event in. Usually there's the 3 weeks before Wimbledon. We were back to 2 this year. Do you really want to play the week before a slam when you're playing best of 5 set tennis? A lot of people won't want to. He had a couple of doubles matches, I think, Djokovic, but was out of practice when he went into his first round match against Jack Draper, who is probably the most promising young British player at the moment. And that showed in the opening set. Draper is the only player so far to have taken a set off Djokovic, and I'm sure that he will admit himself that he caught Djokovic at the best time. He was cold, he was underprepared, and Draper was a good makeup of a player to take Djokovic on because he's young and he's not played much on the ATP tour, so Djokovic wouldn't have known a heck of a lot about him. But he's also very talented and really backs himself. And with the big lefty serve that he has and the damage he can do with the forehand, he could guarantee that he was going to get himself some cheap points to stay in touch and put the pressure on Djokovic, particularly when it started raining and the roof came on. Those conditions were in the favor of Draper, and he was able to utilize that. So I was not overly surprised when Draper took the opening set. I think probably most of the world would have been giving Draper a 0.5% chance of getting the win. I was giving him 2% just because Djokovic was cold, and because where else would you, if you had to take on Djokovic, you'd pick the first round, right? But I think that it gave Djokovic the match play he needed and the practice, really, to warm himself in for the rest of the tournament. He certainly did feel some pressure and some long games in that match, but it was pretty comprehensive in the next 3 sets. So 4-6, 6-1, 6-2, 6-2 for Djokovic, leading into a second round meeting with Kevin Anderson. And those that know their tennis will know that this was a rematch of the 2018 final, which itself was not close. This one was even more one-sided. Anderson didn't have a single break point opportunity. 6-3, 6-3, 6-3 for Djokovic, and certainly taking some steps up from that first round. Third round was very interesting for me. He took on Denis Kudler, American qualifier, whose status does not accurately represent the type of tennis that he can produce. Kudler has long been a great performer on grass courts. He's had his best results, or some of them, on the surface. He faced Djokovic here in 2019. He has a killer backhand down the line, and he can lob, he can mix it up. So he was going to be a very interesting challenge for Djokovic, and he proved it for the majority of the first set. He was doing all the things I knew he would be able to do, getting on top of Djokovic, staying with him at the baseline, moving him around. And then it came to 4-all, and then 5-4 for Djokovic, and that scoreboard pressure was right there. And Kudler was just not really a threat from there, because although he made that third set close, how many players truly believe they can beat Djokovic when they're 2 sets to love down? It's no shame on them and no pointing the finger at them, because it's just a fact that Djokovic is a mental giant, and once you're down by that deficit, you're in a lot of trouble. So 6-4, 6-3, 7-6, Djokovic once again proving that he knows the exact moments to peak, the exact moments to penalize, and the moments that are ultimately going to be key in the outcome of a match tends to be there for them. Round of 16 against Christian Garen. Now, Garen's more made for a clay court than a grass court. He just didn't have the weaponry and the tools to really get under Djokovic's skin or disrupt his rhythm in any way. So you can't really take a lot from that match, which was straight sets for Djokovic, 6-2, 6-4, 6-2. Ultimately, moved into the quarterfinals where he took on Marton Fucsovics. Yeah, it was an interesting match, that one, because it was very windy and Djokovic wasn't really at home in the conditions. He looked a little bit agitated and probably as unsettled as he had been since round 1. And he was 5-love up in that opening set, only won it 6-3, but Fucsovics just didn't have the consistency to trouble. And once again, Djokovic knew when it was crunch time, he had to pull through. 6-3, 6-4, 6-4 for Djokovic, and we'll take a closer look at his semi-final win over poor old Denis Shapovalov, who played some stunning tennis and didn't get a set to show for it. 7-6, 7-5, 7-5 over the number 10 seed for Djokovic. Now, truth be told, some of that, maybe even a lot of that, is on Shapovalov's shoulders, and it's something that he's going to take in his stride and learn from and become a better player and a better competitor because of it. Because the reality is that there is no way on planet Earth that Shapovalov should have lost that opening set. He served for it. He dominated for the majority of it. He kept Djokovic back in the court. time came to serve for that set, and he went tight as a drum. Understandable. He's playing great tennis. He's up against an all-time great in his first Grand Slam semi. Who's not going to feel nervous? But it really came back to bite him, because you do not want to go down a single set to Novak Djokovic at this stage of a Grand Slam. Edged in that set, and it was basically deja vu at the back end of all three sets that Shapovalov played. He kept Djokovic close, he was doing a lot of the right things, and then was drawn into the wrong patterns of play when things got really push and shove, and Djokovic able to come out on top 6-5 and 5. A lot of the stats actually had Shapovalov either level, or maybe he had his nose out in front. The serving stats were similar. The return stats weren't too dissimilar. Both players had a lot of breakpoint chances and weren't really able to push through. And you've got to give them both credit, actually, for their serving and their ability with their back against the wall. Like, they were not really holding back, the two of them. But it did ultimately, once again, come down to the experience factor and the way that Djokovic was just unruffled, bided his time. Shapovalov was dictating a lot of play, and both of them kind of alluded to the fact after the match that Shapovalov had really played potentially the better sets for the first two sets, but just not all the way through. And it has to be to the final point. It wasn't. Djokovic knew when he had to put the balls in the court and allow his opponent to get tight, really, and he did what needed doing to come through that match. So it makes it very interesting looking ahead to the final and weighing up Berrettini's chances, because with Djokovic, he was very recently down 2-0 in a Grand Slam final and came through that match. And when you've done that, what's going to intimidate you? Is Berrettini's serve? Is Berrettini's forehand? Is Berrettini's confidence? These are the questions we have to ask. So, having said that, let's have a look at the head-to-head. It's pretty short, pretty concise. 2 matches played. Both of those matches won by Novak Djokovic. Both have been played since 2019, which is when, as I've said, Berrettini really started pushing through. So the first of those meetings came on hard courts at the 2019 ATP Finals, a historic tournament for Berrettini, becoming the first Italian in X amount of years to qualify for that event, which I could remember off the top of my head. But that was comprehensive for Djokovic, 6-2, 6-1. Understandable to a degree. First time Berrettini's facing Djokovic. I don't think you can really prepare for how flexible that guy is and the way he's able to adjust when you go back behind, and the way he can pull you into scenarios and exchanges that you'd really not be a part of, or rather not be a part of even. And just his quality of return as well. That is going to be a big thing. The fact that Djokovic is going to get more returns in play for Berrettini to deal with, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So 6-2, 6-1 for Djokovic on that occasion. And then they faced off much more recently at the French Open, where Berrettini did well, made quarters, kind of performed to his ranking, but Djokovic had the final say, but did drop a set. So 6-3, 6-2, 6-7, 7-5. That's important because even though Berrettini didn't perform at a stage where he was going to have a real impact on the scoreboard, the fact that he swiped the third set when he was 2-0 down tells you something about his attitude. He doesn't go down easy. He doesn't give up without a fight. And he was still putting it all out on the court to try and give Djokovic some trouble. Ultimately wasn't able to. Djokovic coming through that match, and of course ultimately winning the title, having beaten Nadal in semis, Tsitsipas in final. And that makes this particular final all the more significant for Djokovic, because that Roland Garros trophy, besides being his second at the French Open, making him, I think, the first man in the Open era to win every Grand Slam title twice. Not only did he do that, he got to 19 Grand Slam titles total, which means that he has one major win away from tying Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal at the top of the list all time. Both of them on 20. So he's going to be even more hungry for this, and that is bad news for Matteo Berrettini. We'll have a look at the numbers. We'll have a look at the strategy. I will not overly beat around the bush on this one, because I could sit here going into many a scenario all night, and it's eventually going to come to the same bottom line when I make the prediction. So, what are the key factors here? Everyone's going to look at the serve of Berrettini and the way he's able to get so many cheap points and stay in touch. And it's true, has been able to do that throughout the tournament, and that's a definite weapon for him. And the forehand and getting a lot of balls on that wing is going to be key, because as much as possible, despite the great backhand slice that he has, and despite the drop shot option that he has, and the different things that he can go to off the ground, I've lost my train of thought. That's what happens when it's late. Despite all those options that he has, the serve is the big thing, and I think the big heavy weapons that he has are what is going to do the most damage against Djokovic, because Djokovic is a player who thrives when those baseline rallies extend, whatever the surface, because he's so brilliantly flexible. So when that goes long, he has the stretch and the footwork and the balance to get in the positions he needs to be in to extend those rallies and to finish them on his terms the way he wants to. So Berrettini is going to have to rely on having a good first serve percentage and winning a lot of those first serves. But what's interesting to note about both of these two is that their service numbers have actually been very similar throughout the fortnight. People might look at this as Djokovic as kind of all-court talent and return ability against the Berrettini serve. Djokovic, I think, probably has one of the most underrated serves in the game at the moment, because it's so potent, it's so reliable under pressure, and yet because he's so good in all the other aspects of his game, it's not drawn out a lot as the one big weapon, whereas I think it's actually come to his rescue in some key matches over the past year or so. There have been matches that he's played when he's been fatigued and when he's been feeling it, but I mean, let's have a look back at that match against Dominic Thiem in the semi-finals at the ATP Finals in November. He didn't win that match, but he almost won that match purely because the serve alone was keeping him alive when he had nothing left in his legs. That is a weapon that is very much able to perform and get him some cheap points as well. And when you consider that to be the case, you've got to look at who's the better returner of these two. And as well as Berrettini has done to date, you can't look past Djokovic in that department and the way he's able to get that anticipation and get so many balls back. I mean, let's look at the actual first serve numbers. So Berrettini's percentage of first serves won has been in the 80s every match bar the quarterfinals, when it just drops outside when he played Auger Aliassime. But Djokovic's first serve percentage of first serves won has been in the 80s every single match, and even went into the 90s when he played Christian Garen in the fourth round. So Djokovic almost has a little bit of the edge there. And then in a lot of their other service numbers, they are pretty similar. Breakpoints saved all tournament. Djokovic has saved 21 of 26. Berrettini's saved 22 of 27. I mean, you can't get much closer without it being the exact same numbers there. Djokovic slightly more first serves won, but both of them are averaging in the 60s in terms of the second serve points won, which both of them will be looking at as an opening in this match. And so you go again to the fact that Djokovic is probably the better returner of the two. But it's patterns and stuff that really stands out for me here. And I mean, here's the thing, ultimately, I'm not going to ramble on and on tonight. I don't know if you want me to, or if you'd rather I just shut up and get to the prediction, but if Berrettini had won that last match against Hubert Hurkacz in straight sets, I would have been giving him a much bigger chance in this match, because he was deeply impressive for the opening couple of sets, and his form to date has been really good. His body language, his demeanor has been full of confidence and full of belief and full of positivity, even after he dropped that third set. But I go back to the fact that it's a third set that he shouldn't have dropped. He should have won his straights, and he didn't. It didn't cost him in the end, but Djokovic is the kind of player that makes that costly. Look at what he did to Shapovalov. The Canadian did not play a bad match there, and he didn't get a set. Djokovic is just a mental giant, and he's also at the back end of a major. He's going for his 6th Wimbledon title. He's played in 6 finals previously. He's lost 1. You have to go back to 2013 against Andy Murray to find the last time that Djokovic lost a Wimbledon final. I mean, you also look back through Berrettini's run to date, and I'm sorry if it feels like I'm heavily playing Berrettini down here, because I actually think he has the weapons to get this done, but you have to look at the level that he's produced, a very high level, and despite that very high level, he's dropped 3 sets. 1 in the opening rounds, 1 in the round most recently, and 1 midway through. Another worrying thing for Berrettini is that it's been small chances that he's let slip. There have been 2 matches that he's played where he's only faced 1 break point. And in both of those matches, he failed to save that break point. And in one of those matches, that break point that he failed to save cost him a set. So these little things are the things that can be very costly when you come up against the likes of Novak Djokovic in a Grand Slam final. And he has to keep it simple, Matteo Berrettini. I think it has to be quite linear and quite focused for an extended amount of time. And the match against Hurkacz just showed how difficult a task that is over best of 5 sets. If he'd have just kept doing what he was doing for the first 2 sets, he'd have wrapped that up. But it's a long time to keep that kind of focus and sustained intensity. It's such a tough task. The big 3 have made it look easy for so long. It is anything but easy. So I'm not kind of digging into Berrettini here. I fully understand it. And I think that all things considered, he's had a brilliant tournament and a great run. But he has been vulnerable at slight moments. And a lot of the time, those slight moments have cost him to an extent. They've cost him sets. They've cost him breaks. They have shown themselves on the scoreboard. And like I say, you know, he has options. He has the backhand slice, which can be a disruptor of rhythm. He has a really lovely drop shot and great feel in that department. But I think that the options that he has might actually come back to bite him. Now, if anyone saw my preview for the women's final, I essentially said that Barty has way more going on in her game, Pliskova, and that backhand slice is going to be tough because it gets Pliskova low and it takes the rhythm away, etc., which did turn out to be the case. With Djokovic, that's the kind of thing that his movement and the adjustments that he makes means that it's not going to hurt him so much unless he gets tired and unless he's not at his peak level. So I think that the fact he has all these options might actually be detrimental to Berrettini, because in my opinion, and I might be wrong and he might prove me wrong, and credit to him if he does, I think he has to keep this very simple and very linear and very focused if he's going to win this match. He's got big weapons, he's got a huge serve, he's got a brilliant forehand, and I think he has to go after it again and again and again just to try and put Djokovic under some scoreboard pressure and just to try and keep Djokovic out of the match. He does not want to be drawn into this cat and mouse type of play and that style of tennis, which Shapovalov was at times. There were moments where he'd push Djokovic back with a 1-2 and then he just tried to be too clever, and on the 3rd shot he went for a drop shot and it wasn't acute enough and Djokovic got up to it, fired a winner, and that was that. If he goes for those kinds of shots, they have to be nailed. They have to be on point. I'm saying this as if Djokovic is masterful at the moment. Djokovic has not, I don't think, hit his best throughout the tournament, but that's something else that's dangerous for Berrettini because he hasn't peaked yet and he knows when to peak and he knows when to come through. And again, I think that the Roland Garros final is a massive warning shot because Djokovic went into that final looking limp and he went into that final looking a little bit tired. And he wasn't with it at all for 2 sets. But the moment Tsitsipas dropped his head and the break went Djokovic's way, that was match over because he'd got a foothold and he was on the ascendancy. And suddenly it was Shapovalov with, Tsitsipas with a massive opportunity in front of him and got tight. And you know why I said Shapovalov's name? Because a very similar thing happened to him in the last match. It's this tightness that Djokovic just inflicts on his opponents. And how is Berrettini going to stay immune to that? Like I say, I think he has to keep it simple and not get pulled into this back and forth and this craftiness and trying to outfox Djokovic, because very few players can do that consistently across a best of 5 set contest. And the Hurkacz match showed how difficult it is to stay on that straight path. We saw the pitfalls of Shapovalov. We could see the same thing with Berrettini. Now, I absolutely believe that he has the weapons to beat Djokovic, that he has the game to beat Djokovic, and that he has the confidence to beat Djokovic. But one thing he doesn't have is the experience. He's never been in a Grand Slam final. And if Daniil Medvedev, who had 50% of the population backing him against Djokovic at the Australian Open, and almost had me pulled over onto his side, if Medvedev can be that good and that close and not get a set off Djokovic in the Melbourne final, Berrettini is going to have to come up with something special to win this match. And he might do it, but based on the fact that he dropped that set against Hurkacz, and the fact that he's dropped 2 other sets this fortnight, and the fact that Djokovic is pulling for a huge major and is so mentally sound even when physically he's not quite there, I think it would be pretty crazy of me to sit here and with any kind of confidence predict Berrettini to win this match, because as much as it is possible, it's not probable when you look at the numbers and when you look at the history. So based on that, based on the fact that Djokovic is a player who, even when he's not quite hit his stride, is very capable of confusing, of causing the opponent to tighten, and of getting in their heads, based on the fact that Djokovic has been here countless times before, and based on the fact that there is something huge on the line, I have to predict Novak Djokovic to win this match. It's really a case of how many sets I predict it in. Very tempted to say Djokovic in straights, just because of how he shut down Shapovalov, because of how he shut down Medvedev in January. But if there was a very nervy ladies final that we witnessed between Barty and Pliskova. If you watch my preview and predictions video, you'll know that I said on that basis I was leaning towards picking Barty in 3, but I decided to really go for it and pick Barty in 2. She served for a straight sets win and was taking the distance purely because of her tightness. Now, Djokovic went cold into that final against Tsitsipas, so there is every chance that Berrettini could have the quickest start here. But if he goes down 2 sets to love or 2 sets to 1, it is very, very, very slim chances that he's able to come back. So I might, based on the fact he's been serving so big and Djokovic might have a slower start, I'll give it a little bit of breathing room, and based on the fact that the women's final went the way it did as well. And I'll say Novak Djokovic to win this match. I think it could be straights, but Berrettini's got those weapons. So Novak Djokovic to win Wimbledon 2021 in 4 sets. And we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. I feel like I've been incredibly harsh on poor Berrettini here, who has produced some stunning stuff this fortnight, but how will he compete with experience? How will he compete with Djokovic mentally? He absolutely has to swing and stay loose throughout the whole match, and he has to stay on that one track and that one line of focus, and only time will tell whether he can do that. Djokovic is the heavy favourite. I'll be very interested to see who's actually going to call against him in the lead up to the final. I'm very interested to see what Berrettini can do, but that's it from me for this one. So thank you very much for tuning in for this video. I'm sorry that I've not been present throughout the fortnight, but different things going on. I'm back to work on commentary duties next week, so I just wanted to get here and preview the finals after what has been a very entertaining tournament as ever. Great to have Wimbledon back. We've missed it very much last year. And hopefully I will be back at some point. I know some of you have missed the live Q&As. I appreciate the fact that you still enjoy them and you still want them to happen. So at some point I will try and do a live Q&A just to discuss the goings on in the tennis world, hopefully before the US Open. But if you want to know when I'm going to be back and when I'm going to be uploading, you can subscribe and you can hit the notification bell so that you can stay up to date with what's happening on the channel. The event that I'm commentating on next week is the UK Pro League, so it's UK specific. You can watch it via ukproleague.com if you're not in the UK. It's week 5 of what is now an 11-week league that goes on across the year. So if you haven't watched any of that and want to tune in at some point, and you might hear my voice or you might hear the voice of my co-commentator Jenny Drummond. We'll see. But we've wrapped up then. That's it. That's the final preview and predicted. If you weren't here live and weren't able to join in on the chat, then feel free to leave a comment after and let me know what you think of my analysis, if you're giving Berrettini more of a shot than I am. And I will be clear, I do think he has the weapons, but he just lacks the experience, and we'll see if that's an obstacle he can overcome. So yeah, let me know what you think. It's very late, I have to go. Thank you very much for watching, and whenever it may be, I will see you next time.